President Dr. Julius Madabio, serving as President of the United Nations Security Council for August 2024. The President addressed the Council's debates on maintaining international peace and security on the theme, the historical injustice and enhancing Africa's effective representation in the United Nations Security Council. He also highlighted the historical injustices faced by Africa within the UN structure, pointing to the common African position as expressed in the Zulumin Confucius and the Sati Declaration. The President, however, called for 2 permanent seats for Africa, among other things. This morning, to discuss President Bio's chairmanship at the UN Security Council, we have in the studios Thomas Dixon, who is a media and political analyst. Similarly, so we're expecting to be joined in the studios by Yusuf Keketoma Sandi, who is the press secretary at State House. So Dixon, it's a pleasure having you in the studios. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A lot has been said in regards to President Bio being the chairman at the UN Security Council. First off, let's start on a very softer note. What does same means for Sierra Leone? What sort of a picture does it paint for Sierra Leone?
I think Sierra Leone, in terms of its international relations and diplomacy, it's a very good picture. And the fact that, first of all, Sierra Leone was elected into the non-permanent category of the United Nations Security Council is very good for a nation like Sierra Leone, owing to the fact that we've gone through series of issues, war, Ebola, devastating mudslide, and so on and so forth. And now we are making progress. This is not the first time Sierra Leone is actually being part of the UN Security Council. It's the 3rd time that we are part of the UN Security Council. And in the 70s, when we were part of the United Nations Security Council, Sierra Leone was very vocal also in support of China for the permanent seat. And that resulted in us having, at that time you have the Cold War, wherein you can leverage your diplomacy and international relations for positive development. And as a result of that, we have the UAE building, we have the National Stadium, and so on and so forth. And so I think for us to go to be at the Security Council for the 3rd time is also very good for us. This is not the time of the Cold War where you can leverage your position for development. This is the time where nations all over the world are business-minded. Now they will advocate for business and not to give free lunch as it used to happen before in the days of the Cold War. So for example, the Chinese will say, okay, we would have to send some assistance to you for the construction of the bridge, but there is a Chinese company that will give you. The Americans will do similarly. The Russians will do the same. So now it's not the time of the Cold War where you have free lunch like we have with the U building, the National Stadium, and the Aberdeen Bridge. So I think it's also a good opportunity for us to use this position for positive impact on the life of the common man in Israel.
What seemed very clear during the conversation is the issue of Africa having a permanent seat at the UN Security Council. From the states, from a cue on what the president said, he said Africa has a genuine case that he has put forward, and he believes the gatekeepers are finding it very hard to ensure they penetrate through, but the option will reach a time when it will become limited. Thomas Dixon, how well put were those statements from our president
first of all,
a representation of the African continent?
I think the president amplified the common African position.
Sure.
The common African position was developed in 2005.
Sure.
And for Africa to have 2 members in the permanent category of the United Nations, and for Africa to have veto, for the veto system to be fairly distributed. And I think that is what the president amplified in the United Nations Security Council meeting, using the opportunity Sierra Leone has to be president of this month, to amplify the African voice. And it is not only Africa that is talking about the reformation of the United Nations Security Council. You have a group of 4 nations, Brazil, India, Germany, and Japan, also seeking same status. But for them, they are not bothered about the veto system. They are talking about having members for the permanent category to be expanded. You also have another group of nations like Italy, Argentina, Mexico, Pakistan, and Turkey, advocating for the expansion of the council, not just the elected, the permanent category, but for the expansion of the council. So I think President Bio took the opportunity to amplify the African voices, the African voice, which is for us Africa to have a common seat. And he stressed that there is this historical injustice. For diplomatic analysts, they will tell you that at the formation of the United Nations, there were only 4 countries, like those countries are Liberia, Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Africa. They were there. And almost all the other African countries were under colonial rule. So they were not part of the formation, the hierarchical structure upon which the United Nations was built. So one may say it's not just, it is not per se an historical injustice. Africa was not, at that time, not many African countries were there, but today we have 28%, we made up of 28% of member states in the United Nations, which means that decisions that are being taken in the United Nations Security Council is affecting Africa. And Africa, in terms of its population, young population, we have very, very high number of young people, which it's not just a threat to Africa as a continent, but it's a global threat. So I think calling for the reformation of the United Nations Security Council is very, very, very good. But as I always ask, the lady in Gima Dama in Kenema would ask you, what is the impact of President Bio's Security Council statement to the people of Sierra Leone, wherein we have 82% food insecurity, wherein people are finding it very difficult to have a meal a day, wherein the produce that have been production in Sierra Leone, local production like pepper, is 15,000 leones a cup, wherein rice, we are told that rice will not increase despite the 5% tax on rice by the Minister of Finance, wherein we now have a cup of rice at 6 leones.
Well, as you ask those questions, let's usher in Yusuf Keketoma Sandy, who's the press secretary. He's with us in the studio. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Phil. How are you?
Great.
Thanks for having me. Apologies for coming late. I was just about to.
Accepted. Let's pose the last question that Dixon asked straight to you. The significance, importance, impact of Sierra Leone's presidency of the UN Security Council through President Bio on Sierra Leoneans.
Well, you know, when around the world, when every president is elected, we broadly have 2 mandates. The first mandate is a national mandate. That mandate simply means you form a government, you appoint ministers, you have an agenda and a vision, and through those ministers and agencies, they deliver on those mandates. That's a national mandate, okay? And which means, like what Dixon is saying, things for the ordinary people, so we can talk about money, social security, safety net. We can talk about many things the president has done on that front. But this is not the conversation. The conversation we have is about the second mandate. The second mandate is that it is the responsibility of every head of state to make sure the relationship between Sierra Leone and the rest of the world is enhanced. And how do you enhance that? By 2018, when we were campaigning, Sierra Leone had two issues. Firstly, the international image of Sierra Leone was in a very bad state. Remember those times they were saying we are one of the most corrupt countries in the world and many, many bad things. But also secondly, the confidence of our donor partners, our multilateral agencies, internationals, the IMF, the World Bank, all of that, the confidence was very low to the point that they had suspended some of their programs in our country. So President Bio promised two things. The first thing was to see how we can rebrand our image of our country and project it at the
We're
international
so sorry to interrupt you, Keketoma. We're having a bit of a technical challenge with your mic, so we'll take a very short break. We'll take a very short break to sort that out, and we come back so that people don't miss out on the conversation. We apologize for that. We'll be back in a jiffy.
We'll allow you to have a recap.
Yes, definitely. That's right.
Transfer charges chop off a chunk of what you're sending. With no sonko, you can send money for free with AfriMoney any day, anytime, no matter the amount. Dial *161 *1# now to send money for free with no charges. AfriMoney, no sonko.
All right, welcome back. Thank you very much for your patience to stay with us while we sort out that mic. But Yusuf Keketoma Sandy, you would perhaps want to start from the top with your submission.
Thank you very much. Again, apologies viewers for the mic. So I started by saying we have to put this into context. Now, what is the importance of Security Council or the UN or our President of Sierra Leone? So I started by saying, before 2018, when President Bio took over the reins of governance in this country, our country had two problems to deal with. The first was that the image of our country around the world was in a bad state. Like I said, many people thought that Sierra Leone was the most corrupt country, and because of that, it didn't bode well for our image. And the second thing was that when multilateral institutions were working here, many of them, the confidence in our country in terms of what we do in the governance system, it was very low. So you realize that the IMF, the World Bank, they suspended their programs and budgetary support. Now, by 2018, when President was elected, it was elected, and every government around the world, they had two mandates. There is a national mandate and an international affairs mandate. So the national mandate is that you form a government, you appoint ministers, head of agencies, you develop a program of activities and agenda which you need to move. on with as a government, and you entrust those institutions and ministries to develop on those things. So for instance, Dixon spoke about the lady in the village, how does this impact their life? Well, we address that by programs that president has instructed ministers to do. So for instance, whether it's social safety net, whether it's the Munafa Fund, whether it's the program on agriculture, on education, there are national programs dealing with that. But there's a second mandate. And the second mandate is that every president has the responsibility to make sure that the relationship between your country and the rest of the world is enhanced. And that is what this conversation is all about. So the question is, how does this make Sierra Leone, how does this position Sierra Leone on the global platform? So what the president has done is systematically over the past 6 years, whether it's as chairman of the APIM Forum of Heads of State, whether it's about C10, whether it's about all the institutions, whether it's about when the United Nations wanted to talk about education at the global level. The UN Secretary General invited President to co-chair the same program. So it is part of how do we position Sierra Leone to rebrand our country and project our image. So this is what the Security Council means. Now the UN, it's a very unique institution because it was established in 1945, like Dixon said, to make sure that after the Second World War, countries came together, about 50 in San Francisco in California, and then they said, we don't want a repeat of another World War. How do we have an institution where we can make sure we dialogue and we maintain peace and security around the world? At that time, it started with 50 countries. But now, it's almost 80 years. So what we are saying is very simple, that for 80 years, we have operated and worked in a way where the Security Council, by Article 24, Sub-Article 1, has the responsibility primarily to make sure we maintain peace and security. Now, the question is the Security Council fit for purpose for the 21st century, for the new geopolitics? And the argument President Bio is making at the Security Council is simply this, that if you have a continent of 1.3 billion people, 54 nations out of 193 nations, which constitute 28% of the membership, at the Security Council, 60% of the debates, of the issues that are discussed, whether it's peacekeeping or any other issues, deals with the continent Africa. It is but democratic, it is but just for Africa to make sure that we have 2 permanent seats in the permanent category, 2 additional seats, because the configuration at the moment is that Africa has 3 non-permanent membership at the Security Council. But what President Bio is saying, we need 2 permanent members, 2 additional seats, which takes us to 5, and therefore the veto, we want to abolish it. But if you say you want the veto to be there, the veto has to be a right and privilege of all other members. So, but why is Sierra Leone so unique to this? We are unique because Sierra Leone is a great example of why the UN was established. Because we remember from 1995, when the first special envoy of the UN Secretary General, Boutros Ghali, was appointed to Sierra Leone, who was an Ethiopian by then, how they made sure that they safeguarded, they managed our crisis in the war, when they even, Francis Okello, was appointed in 1997 to be special envoy. By the way, they set up the UNAMSIL, and then UNAMSIL in 2001 shows you that the UN is an institution which, if properly reformed, if we make sure that we enhance our representation, it's a force for good. Because we realized by 2001, by the time they sent UNAMSIL about 17,500 peacekeeping force in Sierra Leone, it was one of the largest they've ever done. So that is the story we take to the Security Council, that we've gone through war. The UN has been part of our story. So therefore we are unique. And because we are unique, we think, whether it's for legitimacy, it's for the geopolitics, it's for equity, we think it's about time. And what was special about this session? It was special because for the first time in the history of the Security Council, an African head of state was presiding with an agenda on the reform of the Security Council. That is one. But secondly, it was the first time in the history of the Security Council that all the P5s, All the P5s, the China, the Russia, the US, the UK, all of them, and France, they spoke with one voice, that it was about time we reform the Security Council and have Africa an enhanced representation. So this also spoke about different interest groups. Other countries who want for them to be in the Security Council, those are all interest groups. But what we are saying is that they will have to isolate Africa and treat Africa as a special case. And a special case because 1.3 billion people cannot be matched to other countries which have a less population. That is one. But also, if you discuss 60% of debates and issues regarding a continent, it's about time we have that representation. So what President Bio is making is a special case,
that
not
special
in the group
case,
of the
Yusuf,
others.
that President Bio made has gone viral on social media, especially by other Africans who applaud the selflessness that the conversation there was about the continent on a positive note. Reminds me of how Sierra Leone and China got into this very romantic relationship that has led to several benefits for Sierra Leone as a country from China. What's President Bio's office doing now to tap into this celebration of other Africans of what he did at the UN Security Council to end in a way where, as we are with China, it started by Sierra Leone doing good to them, then they've repaid us. What is Sierra Leone doing now? What's President Bio doing to tap into this relationship with other African countries?
Fib, the world has changed. The world has changed. Now Sierra Leone has many friends. China is our friend, the US is our friend, and I believe what we would do with the Security Council, the primary objective is to make sure that in the lifetime of President Bio, or maybe under his leadership, you never know, we'll make sure that UN Security Council reform happens. Okay? That's the positive case. But as a country, what this has also done to us is to make sure that we have enhanced our relationship. When we finished the debate on Monday, we had a bilateral meeting with the UN Secretary General. You know, when he spoke, I had goosebumps. He said to President Bio is the voice of wisdom in Africa now. Is the hope of Africa. What does that mean? Regardless even of the debate, he even praised President Bio of his leadership in the Sahel region. Because you also understand that in the Sahel region, we have issues about terrorism, security, instability. So, essentially what he was saying is that because of what President Bio is doing to project not only our image, but also the leadership, it means that other countries will now see Sierra Leone as a partner and see Sierra Leone as a place where what we are doing back home is to make sure that we cement our relationship. And it's no coincidence. The fact that we went to Vienna, we had development partners, sat on the table, and they pledged and raised $800 million. It's not coincidence. It's because they see President Bio and our government as a credible government, as a credible president, but also as a government which means well for its people. So which means that we will not only make sure that our agenda on the reform is amplified and taken to a logical conclusion, but also we'll make sure that we will use this to enhance our relationship with other countries and other partners so they see us as a country as an investment destination because of our image, our profiling, and as a country and as a president who actually wants to do what is best, not only for his country, but also for the continent. But over and beyond that, there is also another agenda. So in the latter part of August, we will also preside over a debate on the new agenda for peace. Now, the new agenda for peace talks about really what is our perspective towards peace? How can we enhance peace? And that is why I said we have taken to the Security Council a unique experience because of our transition. Because as part of also the first debates we had, we also launched a Peace and Art exhibition where we told the stories about Sierra Leone, about how we transitioned, about TRC, about special courts. And these were stories for other countries and the world to learn that yes, your country can be beset by war, but you can journey from the devastation of the war to a country that is liberal and progressive. And that is the narrative and the story President Bio is selling.
Keketoma, the president during his statement seemed very much composed in hammering home his point. But again, I listened to Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield,
Yes.
who says that nations should move away from the problem and then
Find the
move
solution.
towards finding solutions
Yes, that's
to
correct.
the problems
That's correct.
that have been highlighted. Does such statement depict support to what President Bill said? Does it depict adherence, or are we open to see a situation wherein, just as you rightly mentioned, within the tenure of President Bill, or soon to come, we'll see a situation where in Africa will then secure, if not 2 seats, permanent seats, but 1 permanent seat in the.
So there are
Permanent
2
member
important
category.
aspects to that. Like I said, the reason why the debate was historic, people who know about the history of the Security Council, every time there is a debate, there's an agenda, there is always conflicting information, whether it's China versus US or this country versus this country. But for the very first time, even the Secretary General of the United Nations commended President Bio in the bilateral meeting. He said for the very first time, all the 5 permanent members, because the reason also why we are pushing for the veto is because the veto is very significant and important. Because you can discuss and talk about all of this, but if one member state in the 5 permanent category vetoes it, then that's it. So for the very first time, all these countries, the 5 permanent members, they spoke with one voice. That indeed it was about time for Security Council to be reformed and enhance African representation, but also commended the president for the bold. Because let me tell you, President has an opportunity where we can set an agenda on anything. We would have gone there and said we'll set an agenda on food security, on education, on anything to project what he is doing back home. But he chose to do what none of his colleagues had done in the history, to say, let's make sure this issue, we deal with it. So now solution, what is President saying? President is not only saying we debate about it, we discuss it, no. Now we are looking at the next step. So what's the next step? So the next step that we are looking at now is this. So all the ambassadors of the C10 countries, those who work in New York and Addis Ababa, they are going to have a retreat. And normally those retreats, they will normally host them in either New York or Addis Ababa. But President is saying no. He said for us to escalate and move on this agenda, we are going to host all of you in Freetown in December. So which meant that they are coming in Freetown. They are now coming to look at a model on how we are going to make sure we translate this support and commitment into something meaningful and tangible. Why? Because in September, before December, they are going to have what is called Summit of the Future. Because even the Security Council now, they also think you can form an international organization for the past almost 8 years. It has to be fit for purpose for the 21st century. So there are many things, like Dixon said, other countries are asking for reform. Many things need to change because of the geopolitics, because of the representation, many things. So the Summit of the Future is an opportunity where they are now going to now plan on what are the things that need to change. And what is the significance? Because of President's bill, because of the agenda, that Summit of the Future is going to have clearly and boldly, as part of the compact, reform of the Security Council, Africa's position. So which is something historic and important.
I suppose Dixon has a contrary view to most of the things you've said, Thomas Dixon.
First of all, I think we need to know this, that since the formation of the Committee of 10, the African Committee of 10 on Reformation, Sierra Leone has been at the pivot. Sierra Leone has been advocating. In fact, that was re-echoed by the Mozambique rep, applauding the commitment of Sierra Leone to the reformation of the United Nations. So it's not as if, as I said, President Bill amplified the voice of the African continent. It's not as if it's a President Bill thing. former President Nkrumah was the head of C10. When President Bio came in, he took over. So since 2005, we've been part of this Isolini consensus. So I think we have to make that very, very clear. And we talked about international rebranding Sierra Leone globally. You cannot rebrand a nation globally when you've not done your homework in your house. You cannot rebrand a nation when you are infested with poverty. Half of your population are poor. You cannot rebrand a nation when, in fact, you don't have better health care. You go to a cottage, people are struggling for simple things. That's the real rebranding. The real rebranding is when you are able to ensure that you have a good atmosphere nationally for employment of the young people. But where you have majority of your young people unemployed, that is not rebranding. So this is not the first time.
What are you suggesting,
this is not the
Dixon? Would Sierra Leone have rather passed on that opportunity to fix everything else?
Sierra Leone has been on this agenda for a very long time. I've just said it, that it's not. We are even applauded that since 2005 our commitment is unshakable. Our commitment is unwavering. But if you are telling me about rebranding a nation, you cannot rebrand your nation internationally when the indicators, the least common denominators are terrible in your country. So that is what I'm saying. And Mr. Keketoma also talked about Sierra Leone and the rest of the world, international image. I've clarified that. And I also want to state here that this particular thing is not only good for Sierra Leone, it's good for all of us, for the UN to be rebranded. And for the commitment of international bodies, this is not the first time. Even President Biden, in 2022, in his statement at the United Nations General Assembly, accepted that the United Nations Security Council and the United Nations itself needs reformation. And all the ambassadors, the major players, they re-echoed that particular sentiment. But if you look at the politics, the geopolitics, you look at the statements of China, they were throwing jibes at the West. You look at the statement of Russia, they were throwing taunts at the West. The West also, they were also telling the president, we are supporting you. But we are also concerned about situations, democratic situation in Africa. We are also concerned about the deteriorating democratic situation in Africa, the fact that in the Sahel, as Riley said, and West Africa, we are witnessing so many military coups. So these are statements that we are echoing. As he said, there are many players fighting for the reformation of the African continent. And this would have to be done, not by the Security Council, but at the General Assembly, by 2/3 majority, with all of the 5 members supporting you. So it's a daunting task. It's a very complex task for Africa, for us to have 2 member states in the United Nations. It's very, very complex because you need the support. And just by their statements, you are seeing the politics. The top 5 countries. I listen keenly to the rep from China. I listen keenly to the rep from Russia, the one from UK, the one from the United States and France. So you are seeing them, even though they were supporting, they were also throwing that. China was claiming that, China and Russia, they were claiming that the West and the United States, they are responsible for slavery, they are responsible for colonialism, and so on and so forth. So you have the politics at that level. It's a geopolitics at that level. So Africa, and also what is also good for the press secretary to tell us, we see lots of people from Sierra Leone attending. They were part of government delegation. And he's also giving us information about they are coming to host the C10 ambassadors here. It costs money for a poor country like Sierra Leone. He has to tell us how much was spent. For example, a local council leader was taken, some civil society leaders were taken So he has to tell the public how much was spent. So I think these are the information you should be telling, not just to tell us that you have goosebumps when President Bio is not the first president that spoke about the information of Africa. Presidents have been speaking about the information of the United States Security Council about justice for Africa. They've been speaking about it passionately more than President Bio. So I think, as I said, the president merely amplify the voice of the African continent.
Can I just respond to some of the things he said?
Just quickly.
You see, it's sad sometimes when you come to the shows and then whether it's deliberate misunderstanding of things people do. Nobody's talking about sitting, yeah? Sitting has been there, but this is above sitting, okay? All what sitting does is to advocate in a confinement. What the UN Security Council does is to put you on the global stage, okay? It's like you have a community, and then they say, represent the community. And then they say, okay, come and represent Sierra Leone. That is the gap that's there. So nobody is talking about the sit-in. The sit-in is not an issue. What we are saying is that it's the first time for an African president to have the opportunity to preside over Security Council and put on the agenda of the Security Council the reform of the Security Council. So it's different from president giving interviews. That is not the issue. And then secondly, he also spoke about impact, about what should be happening in our country nationally. There are two issues I said earlier. But
the two can't be disconnected.
No. But they are separate issues. Talk about health. It's under President Bio. For the first time, we reduced maternal mortality by 60%. It's a fact. Okay? We've just opened at Lumley 142-bed hospital. Okay? So we cannot conflict the two issues. There are issues about what government is doing, about the welfare of people, which is a separate matter. So we can come, I will discuss with Dixon from agriculture to economy. I will go to Ministry of Transport. I will go to, we'll discuss about that.
What do you think was learned during these sessions that will be replicated back home for the development of this country?
So you have to ask yourself the question, what's the purpose of the UN as an international body? That's the first question. And what does UN Security Council does? Because if you understand that, then you don't talk about somebody in the village who wants to eat or bread and stuff like that. Because they are two separate issues. What do we learn? We learned that for the first time, all of these permanent countries can converge on an issue as important as Security Council. And they spoke with one voice. Those issues about China talking about US, those are all geopolitics. They are irrelevant because we as a country are not interested in that. What we are interested in is to make sure that our agenda is moved and it's been discussed. But also, secondly, he also spoke about what we're doing as a continent, about democracy, about issues for us as an antecedent for this agenda. But it's not a justification because around the world in England, they have been rioting for the past weeks about their own issue. In the US, there are issues about their democracy, about everything. So we are not, you see, we cannot lose focus and lose sight of what is important. And what is important? What is important is this, that for almost 80 years, we have a body, a Security Council, that under Article 24, sub-Article 1, which has a mandate to maintain international peace and security. Its legitimacy has been questioned because you have a continent which you discuss 60% of issues and it's not represented. B, the geopolitics, it has changed. We don't live in the era and the world immediately after the Second World War, where you just have the superpowers. Now, other countries and other continents have meaningful roles to play. So the things that we've learned are that, one, for Sierra Leone, when I spoke about international image and rebranding, the Rwanda government, they spend millions of dollars just to put on the Arsenal jersey, visit Rwanda as part of their branding.
Was that not a very fine PR?
That's what I'm saying. So we don't, no, that's what I'm saying. We don't have that money. So
it's a question that I asked.
So I'm saying, so it's good. If you have the money, you can spend it. But what do we have? We have a president who is credible, who is respected, who can use his global standing to sit and chair those meetings, those big countries, and make a case for the continent. And let me tell you what's interesting.
What we
in
also
Nigeria,
have,
South
Keketoma,
Africa,
is
all these
about
countries.
5 minutes more to round off this conversation. And what we also have are tons of messages on our Facebook page, which we need to bring out some of them.
No problem. We'll deal with that.
Usman Kavoni is saying national issues are more vital than UN security.
Mosdi says Ambassador Greenfield also raised some questions indirectly indicating the challenges of Africa achieving a seat, not talking about 2 seats. She mentioned that the Caribbean countries, also the Latin American countries, which tells us that Africa is not the only continent being left out.
Kamara Charles says he is the first to speak about Africa representative at the UNSC. Others have been speaking at the UNGA. Dixon received knowledge and stopped misinforming the public.
Abbas Habib Kokabangali says, why Dixon always play this political game between APC and SLPP? This guy can't analyze anything with measuring and Escoma's government. I guess, okay.
Alhaji Amara Kebe says, Dixon, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. You cannot make this great achievement look like a village gathering. This is huge for Sierra Leone.
Ibrahim Jakema says, the United Nations international media coverage on the UN Security Council has been one of the best in showcasing Sierra Leone on the global stage. Thank you, Press Secretary Yusuf Keketoma Sandi, for leading media architecture of the President's communications. In making this possible, as Sierra Leone was once again in the international and national media for a good reason.
Mustafa Sawi says, Dixon, you are not honest to yourself. The fact that Sierra Leone has gained such a position at the UN Security Council in itself is rebranding of our country. There is no way you can trivialize this. No way, sir.
Dowson John Kamara says, is this the first time for Sierra Leone to chair the UN Security Council? Should I continue?
Yes, go on a minute.
Mosdi says 50% of the conversation in the UN Security Council is about Africa, and around 70% of the budget is for Africa. My question is, how much do Africa contribute financially to the UN Security Council?
Ronald Beresford Georgestone says, too much libele by these so-called appointees. They forget about the economic hardship facing Sierra Leoneans. Instead, heap praises on a speech by the president, which isn't anything new, but things the average Sierra Leonean going through his or her daily struggles is worried about some speech.
Continue if it's loud more.
Well, because of time, I think we'd have to limit the messages to those.
Bashiru Mustafa says, this is the problem, my brother. The minister just talking about political points, not telling us the truth. I think...
Finally, Ronald Georgestone says, but issues at home where its citizens should feel good about their future is a different kettle of fish, young man. Stop your pleasantries that are becoming a joke. We are not amused. Your response, gentlemen, to these messages?
This one lastly from Osman Suleiman Priskavuni says, how does UN Security Council feed Salon?
Firstly, I think for those who are talking about this, this is part of democracy. And in a democracy, journalists should have a platform where they subject government to account and make sure they ask questions and speak on behalf of people. It's a healthy democracy. Now, it's a different question from how do we enhance this debate? And that's why I said we should not conflate things. Yes, around the world, every country, there are challenges. There are challenges with the economy, there are challenges with feed salon, there are challenges with education. But you have a president and a government that we are dealing with those challenges, are dealing with those issues, okay? Now, what we are doing on this occasion is to ensure that A, we'll make sure the opportunity we have at the highest level, at the highest peak, we use it to discuss and find solution about something that has to do with the continent. And that is why, as I speak to you now for the past 1 week, in many countries in Nigeria, president's image and face has been on papers because we are riding this thing as a whole. Now, what does this mean for Sierra Leone? It means a lot. It means our country is respected. Our country will now use this to enhance with our development partners. Like I said, when President Bio went to Vienna and called the conference, people made pledge of 800 million. It's not by chance. It is because these development partners, they see a credible and a respected president. And we also have a story to tell about the UN as well. So, like somebody said, this is not about a mundane thing about what does this mean for the man in the village. No. Otherwise, once you say that, what you're doing effectively, you are almost undermining what should be a legitimate national conversation. We would have conversation about the price of the cost of living. We will have conversation about what we are doing for Fit Sierra Leone.
It's just localizing a global
exactly.
conversation.
I'll confidently say we're doing extremely well on all of those issues. He spoke about health. And I said, under President Bio, 60% of maternal mortality has been brought down. Okay? There are social safety nets. We are giving lots of vulnerable people monies. There is Munafa Fund. There is free education. So there are a lot of things going on. But it's a separate conversation. What we are now having is how have we got a president who has used his only opportunity he has at the Security Council to make sure we make a case for our continent, but also use it to make sure we enhance our image internationally.
We'll slightly have to overrun.
Thank you very much.
There are a lot of text messages on the global agenda. Global agenda definitely will have impact on the local people. Every global agenda will have impact on the local people. And that is why, even as a nation, we are being rated. If you look at food and agricultural rating, global rating is to compare. You look at UN Human Development Index, is to compare countries, to see how far you've gone. And for somebody, to a government person, to say that if people say, how is the UN affecting somebody in Sierra Leone, is mundane, then you know what this government is all about. For me, he said that they've reduced maternal mortality rates. The latest report on maternal mortality rates have been reduced, good, but we still have the highest in the world. We still have the highest in the world. We talked about the hospital which was built by the Japanese International Corporation at Lumley for $16 million. The hospital that was built for $16 million, we have a government spending $28 million on traveling, which could have been used to build other hospitals, not just relying on foreign aid. And they said misrepresentation. The agenda of Africa for the rebranding of the United Nations Security Council was based on the Committee of C10. It is the Committee of C10 that is leading that agenda globally, even at the United Nations. That is why the president, I did not speak when we were talking, that's why the president is inviting ambassadors of C10 to come in December and discuss the African position, because they have to advocate for it. That committee was set up. In fact, the name of the committee is Committee on C10, on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. So for you to say that is misrepresentation, it's not misrepresentation. When I started my discussion, I predicated it on the 2005 Common African Position, which built, gave birth to the C10. So for that, I want to, and you can't just say rebrand. I insist, if you want to rebrand a nation, your rebranding should be reflected on the people. It's not just for the president. This is for a term. Sierra Leone is at the Security Council for a term. Sierra Leone is chairing the Security Council for the month of August. Mozambique, other countries have chaired the Security Council before. So let us not begin to play politics with it or make as if Sierra Leone is now New York or Sierra Leone is America. No, Sierra Leone can only be rebranded when the lives of the people are better.
Okay, Thomas, Dixon, quickly, we go for sports. When we come back, we'll allow you to respond and we wrap up this Keketoma. Before the sport news, you were trying to say something. I suppose it's your parting cut.
Yes, it's my parting cut. Firstly, I think Dixie spoke about, which is more of an oxymoron, that we have reduced maternal mortality by 60%, but we are the highest in the world. That is not true. Afghanistan, Somalia, hold on. You've given your own bits, okay? Afghanistan, their infant mortality rate is higher than Sierra Leone, which is obviously what I'm saying to this. But also, secondly, nobody is saying in this conversation the price in the market, the welfare of Sierra Leoneans are not important. No. That is why in my initial conversation, I said there are two separate issues. And these two separate issues, if we don't separate them in the conversation, we will conflate things. But then, because Dixon always has this way of just making things down as if less important and stuff, which I think it's a disservice to the conversation. Yes, it's important to make sure that we address challenges in the health sector. It's important to make sure we address food security. It's important to make sure there are challenges in our justice system, we address it. Yes, of course. And that is why we have a government. You have ministers, and they are taking those actions. But it's a separate, entirely different issue from how do you have a president that projects your country with the international community. And that is what we are having now. This is not just about, I will come the other day, we'll talk about the bread and butter issues, about the economy, about how our economy is doing. We'll talk about it for the next 1 week. I'm happy to do it. We'll talk about education. I'm happy to do it. But we are here on the Security Council platform at the global stage. We are talking about how you have a country of a small nation who has made sure that we have so much respect in the world. And for the first time, and he kept talking about the C10. Again, I think, with respect to Dixon, he does not understand this issue. C10 has been advocating for this for a long time. That is not in dispute. But now it is beyond C10. What we are now saying, it's the first time in the history of Security Council for an African president, not C10, for an African president to be a chair of Security Council and put on the agenda. This is a process. It's not happened overnight. Because before they make even the program of work, it's a lot of work. But Dixon does not understand this. For a first time for put in the agenda to debate about reform. So yes, C10 has done a fantastic job. But this now is beyond C10. It's about saying whatever C10 is doing, you now have a president who is the first time has taken it to the UN Security Council, where you have colleagues. It is now beyond the continent, and we'll discuss
I think that will be a satisfactory response.
Yeah, no, of course, definitely.
But nonetheless, thank you so very much, gentlemen. Thomas Dixon, quickly, Thomas.
I think he talked about it. Mr. Keketoma keeps talking about the C10 not being, it's at the United Nations Council. President Bio is the president. Sierra Leone is chairing the C10. And you can see where that developed from. And the man is hosting the C10 in December from Keketoma. He's hosting the C10 here in Sierra Leone. To continue the advocacy. So coming back to the local issues you mentioned. Every local issue is international. Every local issue is international. Today, the world is grappling with global youth challenges. Youth from Africa are going to Europe en masse. That's a global issue. It's a local issue, but it's also a global issue. So for you to sit here and say, oh, come on, all of these things are indices, are global indicators. They are always rating them. And I will tell you that Sierra Leone maternal mortality is still very, very high in the world.
It's not the highest in the world.
Sierra Leone has the highest maternal mortality in the world.
It's not correct.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Do research. That's correct.